Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. As you can see in the picture today, let's start the story of where Issei was the reincarnation of the heavenly demon god part 2. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more information. Now let's get into part 2. Sitting now on the ground in the middle of the training dungeon, Issei sat opposite to Sona as Issei looked at her with a passive stare. So Sona, I'm gonna ask you a few questions first. Answer them truthfully without overthinking about the answer, understand? Issei asked as Sona nodded. Good. First question. What is demonic energy? Sona gave a confused look at the absurd question before answering. Demonic energy is the magical energy commonly used by devils and demonic entities. She answered straightforward, which made Issei nod. Correct? Second question. How does one use demonic energy? Issei asked again. Sona answered without hesitation. They have to use their imagination to properly use their demonic energy. Issei gave a raised eyebrow before shaking his head. I didn't mean by using it for a spell or demonic power. I'm talking about how does one use their demonic energy alone. No form of technique or spell. Just pure demonic energy. Issei corrected himself as Sona blinked in confusion as the answer didn't came to her immediately. I don't know, Sona replied, making Issei close his eyes. It's negative energy. Listen well, because I'm not repeating this. Demonic energy is a form of negative energy that has been used by devils and demons through sinful desires and emotions. Negative energy is born from negative emotions. To explain it in a short way. From negative emotions, negative energy is created. And from negative energy, demonic energy is born. However, demonic energy isn't the only thing born from negative energy. Things like divine energy and dragonic energy can also be born from negative energy. Hell, the holy power used by fallen angels are fueled by negative energy, which is opposite to the pure angels who use positive energy, which is the key difference between the holy energy used by angels and fallen angels. Issei explained as Sona listened attentively. She never knew demonic energy functioned that way. So you're saying that all forms of energy is either created through positive and negative energy? Sona asked in understanding as Issei nodded. Most cases that's so. But there are exceptions. Like dragons are actually positive and negative energy combined, which makes them so strong. And gods have a much deeper connection with positive and negative energy depending what kind of god they are, Issei answered before letting out a sigh. But that's the basics about how demonic energy is created. However, it isn't as simple as you think. Born positive and negative energy are very adaptable and change constantly, which create exceptions like the fallen angel who were once beings that used an element that is born with positive energy, but later changed to negative energy. Another exception is the dragon before the beginning of the world, Arthas, who technically isn't born with any form of positive and negative energy. It is supposed to be infinite without any form of emotion, but that's enough about that. It's time for you to come in contact with your demonic energy, Sona. Issei let out a breath as he looked at Sona. So you're saying that for me to access my demonic energy, I've to draw out my negative energy through bad emotions? She asked, making Issei nod. Yes. Now meditate and focus on my voice. Issei ordered as Sona followed. Closing her eyes and adopting a meditating stance, she listened to what had to say. Now focus on what angers you in this world. The entire time you had to stay in your sister's shadow, the fact your family denied your birth blessing because of the shame of your ancestors, the fact that even your peers were given the spotlight, leaving you in the dark all alone with just the citron name. Issei's words brought all these unpleasant memories back. Sona's eyes twitched as her anger started to rise within her body. What do you most in this world, Sona? Issei asked like a snake coiling around their prey, his words tempting Sona's mind. I want to rise above my sister. To have the fame that she has. I wanted to show off my eyes to everybody. I wanted to get the attention that Rias is getting, Sona muttered, as a blue and violet aura started to surround her. Her own envy rose to the max, and it started to literally leak out of her body. Issei watched with a large grin as Sona started to give in into her dark thoughts. And what will you do now if they stand before you? You're gonna accept such a dull destiny? Issei asked with his grin glowing larger, as Sona's aura rose some more. Her aura started becoming like water surrounding her in the form of a large serpent. I'll drown them, my sister, my family, Rias, and even my peerage. Nobody will stand in my path for glory. Sona opened her eyes, showing her snake eyes glowing ominously as the water snake around her flared with power. Issei grinned widely as he stood up and clapped. Well done, you already accomplished the first step. Issei praised as Sona slowly calmed down as she looked at her water serpent before dispelling it. I feel lighter, like a burden has been lifted from my shoulders, Sona admitted as Issei chuckled. Giving in to your real feelings while letting go of those that hold you back naturally make you feel lighter. Now you're done with your first lesson. We will focus on water manipulation. Issei explained before generating an orb of water. Well, people underestimate the element of water, but personally water is if not the most dangerous out of all the natural elements that exist in nature. You know why? Issei asked as Sona stood back up while shaking her head. Because water is adaptable. Water is the element of change. Master water users can, with enough experts, turn water into ice. Like your sister, and by opposite use gas. Issei explained as he made the water orb freeze completely before undoing it and changing it into an orb of gas. So you're telling me I'll be able to achieve that level of mastery? Sona asked as Issei nodded. Yes. However, there is a current problem, that is your demonic energy reserves. It's average at best, most likely because of your age. But we can fix that. I want you to hold on to this. Issei handed Sona the remaining corpse part, which happened to be one of horns. Sona's eyes immediately could see the sheer amount of demonic energy flowing from the corpse part. That sheer aura she could see with her eyes even surpassed that of her older sister. So much power, Sona thought as she slowly grabbed the horn part with her hands. What do you want me to do with it? Sona asked as Issei chuckled. It will help you increase your demonic energy reserves at a much faster pace. Don't absorb it into your body. The power is too much for you. Also, I don't know what happens if you absorb it. Maybe you'll die or mutate because of it. So don't risk it. I want you to use it by taking a fraction of demonic energy from it and absorbing it into your own body. My body parts are like bottomless energy source, so they don't run out of energy. So each day you take a fraction of demonic energy and add this to your own. This will result in your own demonic reserves growing larger as a result without heavily affecting your own demonic energy. Also, you'll have to do regular meditating exercises to ensure you mentally don't go insane, Issei explained as Sona looked at the corpse part before taking a breath and focusing her aura. She followed Issei's instructions and absorbed a very little bit of energy of the horn into her own body. It wasn't much, but she felt her own reserves growing larger by a little bit. It worked, Sona revealed as Issei nodded. Good. I'll entrust that part to you for the time being. Use it in the spare time, but make sure others don't catch you with it. Issei warned as Sona nodded. Understood, sir. Sona accepted his conditions as Issei explained the other part of her training. Of course, magical training won't be all you're gonna be training. Physical training is also a must, since if your body is too weak to contain that much power, you simply break down. So I'll be assisting you with gravity-enhanced exercises as well, Issei explained as Sona nodded. Is there any other thing we will be focusing on? Sona asked as Issei thought for a moment. Later, we'll move on to more challenging techniques. But for now, it's mastering your demonic energy, increasing your demonic energy, mastering water magic, and increasing your physical capabilities. I won't go easy on you. You might die a few times, but I'll bring you back. Don't worry, Issei assured with a savage grin as his eyes glowed crimson. Sona, however, didn't look nervous or scared. She gave him a challenging smirk with her snake eyes glowing violet. Do your worst, she challenged as Issei just grinned back at her. End of the day, meaning 8 days later within the time-altered barrier. Sona stood in the middle of the training dungeon surrounded by magically moving training dummies that were heading her way armed with swords and spears. Sona, however, didn't look phased as she opened her eyes, showing her snake eyes that showed a battle-hardened face. She effortlessly dodged the sword and spear strikes with elegant grace before generating a ring of water around her body, before it fired extremely thin slash of water that sliced the dummies into pieces. From a distance there was another dummy that fired a fire spell towards Sona at high speed, but the high-ranking evil didn't falter as she clasped her hands together. Piercing stream. Water condensed itself within Sona's hands as a thin stream of water shot out her hands at incredible speed that pierced through the fire spell and shot right through the dummy's body, creating a large hole before the dummy fell to the ground. Suddenly, another wave of dummies appeared surrounding her as they all started charging towards her. Sona, however, just smirked as she created a magic circle underneath her, as the entire room was suddenly filled with water as all the dummies were caught onto the large pool of water. Sona grinned as she clasped her hands together as all the water started gathering with all the dummies were caught in it. Soon all the dummies were caught in the giant water prison as Sona grinned as the ice prison suddenly froze completely. Sona then dropped the giant ice orb onto the ground, shattering it completely with all the dummies with it. Letting out a sigh, Sona wiped the sweat on her forehead as she turned to Issei with a smile. "Did I do well?" she asked as Issei nodded with a smirk. "You did much better than I expected," Issei admitted as he jumped down by her side. "I can confidently see you already far surpassed Rias. But you've to train harder," Issei instructed as Sona nodded before bowing. "Understood, Lord Issei. Thank you for everything," Sona thanked as Issei just waved her off. "No biggie. But question, what are you gonna do with that corpse part?" Issei asked as Sona took out the corpse part and thought for a moment. A sudden idea sparked in her as she looked at her master. "You don't mind that I experiment with it, right?" she asked, making Issei shake his head. "So long you don't lose it. You're free to do what you want with it," Issei affirmed as Sona nodded with an evil smile. "I think I'll do some research for myself." Sona's smile made Issei smirk. He was indeed right into making her his prized servant. More than 1,500 years ago, inside of a cold, dusty dungeon was a young man in his mid-20s with dark brown hair laying on the cold stone floor chained to the wall. The young man wasn't alone in the old call he was captured in. The young man wasn't in the best shape. His body was beaten up badly with visible scars and fresh cuts across the entire body, along with an entire eye being gone that was previously stabbed out by the young man's captors. Despite the poor condition, the man was still in some good physical shape with a bit of malnourished. Alongside him were mutilated bodies of women and young children. Body parts missing with bones remaining scattered across the dirty floor. The young man let out a small breath as he bit down on the bone as he tore off the flesh bloody meat before gulping it down. He let out another sigh as he threw the bone away, which made it clatter around the floor. "Fuck, there isn't much time left," the young man muttered to himself in the cold as he picked up something beside him. It was the head of someone that looked to be around 6 to 7 years old. "Sorry, my son, I even forgot what your name was, but that doesn't matter now," Issei said to his deceased son that he killed to feed off. Issei was forced to do many unspeakable things, which included the murder of his own wives and children because of the hopeless situation. But Issei kept on trying to survive, not caring that he had to kill his wife's children and then eat them to survive. Looking around as there was only some rotten body parts remaining, Issei clenched his teeth as he closed his eyes. He pondered if there was any way to escape. He was stuck with no possible way out. Before he was captured, Issei was the head of the Hayate clan that ruled a good chunk of land. Issei had a ton of wives, concubines and children after he became head, but after a sudden attack that he couldn't defend against, Issei and most of his family was captured, which led them to their current situation. Issei stayed quiet as he thought over his options. "It's hopeless, isn't it?" Issei mentally asked himself before trying to get some sleep. But suddenly he remembered the words of a witch he had years ago that spouted about making a deal with the devil of hell. Issei wasn't oblivious to the supernatural world. He knew that they existed since his clan practiced in Shinto magic. He was also certain that the enemy clan that he was captured by made some deal with some entity that gave their men the power to destroy his clan. Looking around, feeling hopeless as he looked at the ground for a moment. "It's either die here powerless and starved, or I can gamble my life for one chance. I've nothing more to lose." Issei made up his mind as he focused the last of his energy. "Hear me. The evil spirit that resides in the world of the damned. I say Hidu, summon you to the mortal world. take the flesh and blood of my kin to create the bridge for you to travel to. Fourth. Issei chanted as a magic circle appeared on the ground while surrounding Issei. The bodies of his family started to gather itself towards the magic circle and filled it up completely red. The bodies disappeared as the magic circle was completed and started shining a bright red color. A malicious aura soon erupted that made the entire dungeon start shaking. Soon the gate of the dungeon opened as 2 guards came rushing down towards his cell. "What's happening?" one guard yelled as he saw what Issei was doing, quickly trying to open the cell. Right when he unlocked it and swung the gate open, the sudden wave of energy erupted that made the 2 guards completely freeze as time was stopped for. Issei looked up with his one eye as the magic circle started revealing a tall woman with long white hair and 2 large horns. 2 crimson eyes shined as the devil's skin was revealed that appeared to be pale white like the moonlight. "It's been a while I've been on Earth," the devil mused as she wore a tight royal bodysuit that showed her godly curves and massive melons that should break her back for any normal human. The woman looked around before looking down at Issei with a smile. "So you're my summoner? Issei Hayadu, correct?" The devil addressed the young man as she walked over to him, and crouched down, and placed a hand on his cheek. A wide aura surrounded her hand as Issei felt a sudden relief wash over him as his face healed from all his wounds, as even his eye grew back. "That's better, you're more handsome than I expected." Issei didn't know what twas as he eyed the devil who smiled seductively at him. Lost for words. "You didn't expect such a sexy devil like me to appear, right? Well, I'm also surprised. I've never been summoned to the human world myself. It's a first also for me," the woman revealed as she broke off the chains that binded Issei, who slowly stood back up for the first time in months. She healed the remaining injuries as Issei finally was able to stand back again, which revealed that he was still a bit taller than the woman, who was also tall compared to a Japanese woman. "So you're someone important in hell," Issei deduced as he stretched his hands and wrists a bit. The woman giggled as nodded with a sultry smile. "Oops, I gave myself away with that. But to answer your question, yes, I'm a very important person in hell," the devil answered as she inspected Issei. "But more importantly, I tell you're no ordinary man, Issei Hayadu. 6th son of Gada Hayadu and last remaining child of all 24 that he had. You became head of your clan around the age of 14 and had 9 wives yourself along with 21 children. You were attacked by an enemy clan that resulted in your capture here, which made you resort into cannibalizing your own wives and children. Such a brutal and inhumane thing to do. And lastly, you used their bodies to summon a devil as a last resort." The devil summarized his life, which made Issei laugh. "So you're a mind reader as well? I think I summoned the wrong devil." Issei joked as the devil just smiled. "I'm not saying that I'm against it. Trust me, I've killed a ton of my own children for much lesser reasons. It's rare for a human to have a heart of a devil. You don't care about anybody but yourself. You lived your life with only your own desire and killed anybody that stood in your path. Such selfishness is rare. I like that in a man." The devil mused as she came closer and wrapped her arms around Issei's neck while coming close to his ear. "Sounds like you're stuck with an incompetent husband. Isn't this your second failed marriage?" "Lilith." Issei addressed the devil by her actual name, which surprised the devil, who looked up at him. "Who did you know?" she asked, making Issei chuckle. Lilith wasn't mad or anything, as she was actually more impressed and intrigued by the young man, finding out who she truly was. "When you said you're a big deal in hell and that you have a ton of kids, wasn't that hard to connect the dots? Also, I'm feeling constantly horny with you so close to me, so you're also a succubus from what I can tell." Despite many Japanese clans denouncing Christianity, I studied a lot about foreign beliefs and religion. So I know most important figures in the Bible, Issei explained as he placed his hands on her back to draw her closer. Lilith didn't object at his touch as she stated into Issei's eyes. "Well, that makes things much more easier. But I guess you wish to get rid of this mud hole?" she asked, making Issei quiet as he shook his head. "No. What I want is more than escaping this place. I want power. Power to fight against anybody that stand in my way." Issei answered as his grasp on Lilith's back slowly sank to her bottom as he possessively grabbed her butt. "I get it now, you want to become powerful. powerful to destroy anything in your way. Human or supernatural, that is what you want, right? To become something much greater. Lilith, ex-wife of Adam, and Lucifer Morningstar, asked as she was getting turned on by the young man that piqued her interest. Yes. I don't care what it takes, I'll do anything for power. I'll destroy anything in my way for power. Issei declared, which made Lilith smirk as she grasped his cheeks and kissed him on the mouth. After a hot battle in the middle of the dusty call, Lilith broke the deal as she looked at him with hunger. Good, I can help you with that. Here. Lilith said as from her hand a strange black and red spider lily appeared on her hand that she handed to Issei. This flower will grant you the chance to become more powerful. More powerful than any other, but in return for this flower I need something. Lilith explained as Issei inspected the flower before nodding. My soul? He asked, making Lilith shake her head. No, there is no point in taking your soul now. What I want is for you to help me in the long future. I can look into the future somewhat, and from what I can tell, I'm gonna be in a powerless and vulnerable state. I want you to help me and bring me back. Lilith explained her desire as nodded. If that's all what it takes, then I accept. Issei felt something strange in his heart as Lilith smiled at him. Good. Our deal is made now. I've to return to hell. I'll be watching you from their eyes, or maybe a new name would suit better. How about Okumer? She asked. Issei just shrugged. Sure, what suits you, Lily? Lilith smiled at his answer as she kissed him the last time on the lips before she vanished back to hell. Issei was then left alone as he looked at the flower in his hand. Issei brought the flower to his face and opened his mouth before taking the entire flower inside of it and swallowing it. Right on cue, the guards were back moving as the moment he entered the cell he dashed towards Issei and stabbed him with a sword. Issei, however, kept staying on the ground as the guard looked shocked as he saw Issei still breathing. Moments later, Issei lifted his head back up as he looked at the guard with a wicked grin. His eyes were turned into a glaring crimson red with vertical slit pupils. I've moved beyond humanity, Issei declared before launching his head and opening his mouth before biting through the guard's neck and ripping it off from his body. The other guard looked horrified as Issei just decapitated his fellow guard with his teeth. Issei chewed down on the guard and swallowed the bits of flesh with vigor before crunching down on the skull. The second guard looked like he was about to pass out, but right before he could take another step, Issei stood already before him and grabbed him by the neck before driving his other hand in his skull and ripping out his brain before feasting on it. After eating the second guard, Issei walked free for the first time in months, and he was making sure that nobody but him was walking out of this place alive. After escaping out the dungeon, Issei tore through guard after guard, killing each one with mutilated brutality, leaving nothing but severed body parts scattered across the palace-like building. Issei didn't care as he eventually came across a poor female worker that failed to notice his presence as Issei, without a second of hesitation, grabbed her by her hair and dove his teeth into her neck before sucking all of her blood, leaving as nothing but a rotten corpse on the floor. Issei licked his sharpened teeth before smirking. Women taste much better than men. Well, it suits like I'm gonna feast on this town. Issei sadistically exclaimed before heading to his next victim. The monster has been revealed on Japan that soon will ride forth to become a worldwide calamity. It has been decades after the monster known as Issei Haida, or by his nickname Akuma or Demon God, has been released on Japan. In a matter of a year, Japan went to straight shit. Entire villages and communities were destroyed as Issei laid waste and devoured anybody that was unfortunate to be in his path of power. Humans are supernatural beings. It didn't matter as Issei devoured them one by one. Even his own family that he had left wasn't safe. When Issei returned, he found out that one of his sons became the clan head as they assumed that he died. Issei, however, wasn't happy and slaughtered the remainder of his family in return, which in turn destroyed the Haida clan as a whole. After continuously hunting down any form of prey, Issei slowly gained a fearsome reputation. As a desperate clan of weak humans submitted themselves to him in order to earn his favor while in return, filling any request he may have. Issei, who saw this as a chance to gain more out of it, accepted it and became the object of worship of the village. In those years Issei had fought and devoured many powerful opponents, from talented warriors to literal monsters like himself. With each battle he grew stronger, and his reputation rose with each day, now standing on top a large chair made of bones and skulls. A large demonic figure was sitting while holding the head of a poor woman who was given to him as a sacrifice. Issei had changed a lot in those decades, becoming a humongous 2.5 meters with giant limbs while also growing 2 extra pair of arms. His face has changed a lot as well. His hair grew out to his back while also showing 2 dragonic-like horns along with a giant tail that had a snake on the end. His face also showed his crimson eyes along with 4 smaller eyes above and under his regular eyes along with a giant vertical eye on his forehead. His body didn't look human as it showed large tattoos along with scales and extra mouths that had razor-sharp teeth. But what might be the most scariest part is the extra large mouth he had on his stomach that looked like it could swallow a human whole. It didn't help that the tongue of that mouth was licking the bits of flesh between the teeth. Issei boredly chewed down the woman's head before looking at the bowing servant. Next, Issei's cold words shook the servant, who nervously looked at Issei's feet. "My lord." The servant tried to get a word out but froze as the man felt a bunch of hands coming from his shadow as a couple of zombies crawled out of his shadow ready to drag him in. "Speak," Issei ordered without even glancing at him. "We haven't found a suitable sacrifice yet for your taste," the servant explained with a fearful voice as Issei's eyes darted towards him, which made him shiver more. "I see you're the chief of this town, right? Don't you have any women or children that might suit my tastes?" Issei asked as the shadowy zombies rose higher and were slowly sinking the man in the shadow. "I have only my personal slave left. What does she do?" the man asked, horrified as the zombies were inches away from devouring the chief of the town. "Fine," Issei answered as he commanded the zombies to return back to the shadow. The chief quickly ran and got his maid, who was a green-haired young woman with short hair. She wore ragged clothes and looked to have been through a bad time. "Here's she, my lord." The village chief eagerly gave his servant away to spare his own life. Issei nodded in return as suddenly a giant fox head erupted from his side and bit through the village chief in one bite. "This town is starting to bore me," Issei muttered before standing up and slowly walking towards the green-haired girl who looked to be in her late teens. Issei didn't hesitate and lifted her in the air with his giant head that grabbed her head. Issei, however, noticed something strange. The girl in his hand wasn't afraid. She didn't show any emotion apart from perhaps bliss. "What's your name, girl?" Issei asked, making the green-haired girl look confused before softly answering. "Kurumi Toho, my lord." The girl named Kurumi answered as she closed her eyes awaiting her death. "Aren't you scared to die?" Issei asked as he inspected the girl. The girl shook her head as she didn't dare to make eye contact. "No. My only wish is to serve you, my lord. If my death suits your desire, I'll gladly give you my life," Kurumi stated with absolute loyalty. Issei was genuinely confused as he let go of her head. "You wish to serve me?" Issei's question was answered with a genuine nod. "Not one out of fear or submission. It's my dream and desire to serve a higher being like yourself. You alone stand above anyone. It's my life goal to be useful to you in any way possible," Kurumi declared as she looked him in the eyes this time. Issei narrowed all 7 of his eyes and grinned towards her. "Interesting. Very well, girl. If you wish to become useful to me, make myself a meal out of human flesh and blood. Make it that it tastes good for me. Use anybody you might think will do in this town, and kill them mercilessly. You have 6 hours to create something good or else you will become my next meal," Issei ordered as he sat back down on his throne and rested his head on his fist. Kurumi eagerly nodded and ran off with the determination to succeed her master's expectations. 6 hours later, Issei, who actually took a nap, woke up from the smell of something delicious. Opening his 7 eyes, Issei looked up and saw the giant altar that was used to sacrifice his next meals. But this time, it was filled with plates of actually good-looking human meat. Issei stood up and walked over to the altar and inspected the food. Kurumi walked towards the altar with a plate that showcased the woman's head that looked to be cooked along, decorated with herbs and flowers. "My lord, your meal is prepared," Kurumi announced as Issei silently nodded and grabbed the woman's head of Kurumi's plate and ate it in one go. He chewed on the skull and bit through it like nothing, but his eyes soon widened at the delicious taste that was left in his mouth. "It's good," Issei praised as he kept on eating the well-prepared human feast for him until nothing but blood splatter remained. Kurumi looked ecstatic as her lord enjoyed her cooking to the point he let out a loud burp out of his stomach mouth. Sitting back in his throne, Issei turned to Kurumi, who patiently waited for her master's decision. "You pleasantly surprised me today, Kurumi. In return for such a great meal, I'll reward you by becoming my personal servant for the rest of time. Come here." Kurumi didn't hesitate as she hurriedly walked up to Issei, who pulled her deeper by her waist, making her sit on his lap. Issei then sunk his sharp teeth into her neck and started transferring his blood into her body. Kurumi let out a loud moan as her body was filled with blood and power that was slowly devouring her humanity away. After a while, Issei stopped as Kurumi was laying tiredly on his lap, barely conscious. Thank you, Master." Kurumi closed her eyes as she fell asleep as Issei looked at her with an indifferent look before shrugging and letting her rest beside him. Issei made demons through his blood before, but usually they become mindless slaves that are completely under his control. But Issei made sure that Kurumi's mind wasn't drowned with his power, which would allow her to stay conscious and become a demon with a free will, well, as free as possible since she is still bound to Issei. Time skip. Day Issei's conquest was slowly tacking the fact on the entirety of Japan. Many supernatural races either waged war against him or fled in desperation, but both options led to them being ruthlessly devoured. Issei's most notable conquest was the purge against the powerful Yaokai clan of the Nekashu. Issei ruthlessly murdered 1,000 amongst their kind to obtain their unique abilities. It was no surprise that now their numbers are so low that they are almost considered extinct. Issei, however, didn't care and just enjoyed tormenting those cats for his sick sadistic pleasure. He also devoured the 9 Tails Yaokai that was the king of the Yaokai faction, which resulted in the Yakais becoming far more scared of the demon, and all fled away in hiding. His name was known across the human world as foreigners of other countries traveled in hope to defeat the demon king, but were brutally slain in the process. Hell, even the White Dragon Emperor of that era tried to fight him. While he did give Issei an enjoyable fight, it didn't take long for Issei to dismember the arrogant monkeys before eating them whole. Eventually, the Shinto gods started to intervene as they tried to eliminate him, with a small group of gods who all lost their lives to Issei. Eventually had enough of waiting and decided to god hunting. Standing on top of a mountain with the demon Kurumi by his side, Issei looked up at the clouds and gave a small grin. "It's time," Issei muttered as he readied his weapons in each of his hands. Kurumi nodded before kneeling. "I'll be waiting for your return," Kurumi stated, making Issei nod as he spread his wings and took off to the skies, ready to start his massacre of the heavens. Kurumi looked at her leader with a smile. "Soon he'll stand on top of everybody. The true king of all," Kurumi muttered as she left the mountain. As she came down at the town that Issei ruled over that was now filled with hundreds of monstrous demons, Kurumi raised her hand. "Our Lord will devour the heavens and rise to become the new god of this world. We must show our loyalty by destroying anybody that dares oppose us. Destroy and devour everybody that stand against us," Kurumi commanded as all the demons roared in agreement before scattering and spreading chaos all across Japan, making sure that it will never be the same. "So you dare attack our home?" Vermin Susanoo, the moon god, demanded with anger as Issei just rolled his eyes. "What the fuck does it look like I'm doing, you brain-dead piece of snot?" Issei rhetorically asked before creating a hand sign with his bottom pair of hands. Both gods quickly charged at Issei with their swords and charged at Issei by both sides, but both were stopped by Issei, who blocked them both with his other arms. "Delayed," Issei stated as suddenly his stomach mouth opened and grinned. Organic technique. Elemental calamity. The sudden wave of magic blasted them both back as a barrage of different elemental attack were started being fired from Issei's body towards them. Both gods blocked the majority of the attacks, but both didn't seem to get an opening, allowing Issei to create a new hand sign, Divine Tikink. Ultimate imprisonment. Both gods were suddenly trapped within a golden barrier, as Issei grinned maniacally and created 2 new hand signs with his remaining arms. He spoke from both of his mouths. Demonic technique, devouring darkness, holy technique, calming light. Both Susanoo and Tsukuyomi were shocked as the soothing golden light made them calm instantly, and unwillingly made them decrease their divine aura before they were being overwhelmed by a wave of darkness that drained them of their powers. As soon as the darkness was dispelled, both gods fell to their knees at being defeated so easily. Both gods helplessly watched as Issei walked towards them with a massive grin. He snatched Tsukuyomi with his tail and lifted Susanoo with his hand. Not so divine now, are you? Issei asked with a hungry grin as he brought Susanoo's face closer and licked it with his demonic tongue. Curse you, monster! Susanoo spat with disgust as Issei just grinned. Don't worry, I'll bring the rest of your family soon in my stomach. Now goodbye. Issei then opened his mouth and bit through Susanoo's face and started eating the storm god like a piece of meat. Tsukuyomi just helplessly watched as his brother was eaten alive. He was then grabbed by both of his arms by Issei and started pulling on them hard. The moon god's eyes widened in horror as Issei kept pulling on his arms until it felt like they were being ripped off his body. Which they did. Tsukuyomi had any time to scream in pain as Issei ripped off his arms, which made him fall onto the ground. But Issei still had his tail wrapped around his leg and started pulling his body closer, as the stomach mouth licked its razor-sharp teeth. Tsukuyomi tried to struggle but in vain as Issei pulled Tsukuyomi's body towards his stomach mouth that opened its mouth and started chewing on the remains of the moon god's body as Tsukuyomi screamed with tears in his eyes. Damn, that's good, Issei muttered as he licked the blood on both of his mouths before turning to the giant temple building where the last of his prey were waiting for him. Without wasting a second later, Issei summoned a bunch of devoured gods and raised his hand towards the temple. Bring me Amaterasu. Issei ordered as the devoured gods obeyed and stormed the temple to apprehend the leader of the Shinto faction. Issei waited on a pile of corpses from the gods that died today. A few minutes passed as Amaterasu was being dragged to him beaten up and bleeding. Hello, thee sweetie, glad to see you finally joining us. Issei greeted the sun goddess before standing up and grabbing her by the throat. Just kill me already, Amaterasu begged as Issei gave a sickening grin. I think I'll have some fun first before adding you to my collection, Issei whispered before licking her neck. Amaterasu struggled as Issei ripped off her clothes and gave her a hungry look. Don't, Amaterasu begged as Issei just kept grinning as he started violating the sun goddess. Did you pray today? Issei asked as he started to a redo of Healer the sun goddess until she lost her will to live and got devoured by Issei soon afterwards. After killing off the sun goddess and leaving the heavens in a state of chaos, Issei made his way to the temple that was much higher in the heavens guarded by the last of his prey. So you came, Issei Heidu, Izanagi stated as Issei just boredly looked at him. Ma'am, you really are a bad husband and father. Leaving your wife and Yomi and letting your daughter to be raped and eaten by me and you watched it happen. And here I thought I was the bad parent. Issei joked as Izanagi glared at him with his sword and dashed to attack him. But Issei at this point was too powerful for the creator deity, as he simply raised his sword and created a hand sign, Godsling Tikink. Divine Departure. Issei sliced the Shinto primordial being head off his body along with the other elderly chemists protecting the door. Issei just smirked as he devoured their bodies before looking at the door before him and opened it, revealing a man in a crystal. So this is where you're hiding, Aim no Monokunushi, Issei muttered as the first Shinto deity simply stared at him with no expression on his face. The crystal broke as Aim no Monokunushi floated with a spear in his arms and Aim no Monokunushi's appearance of the Soul King in bleach. Issei readied his own weapons as both all-powerful beings started fighting in the highest of heaven. A long and near-endless erupted as both powerhouses fought for months with no rest until Issei started to slowly overpower the first Shinto god and succeeded in weakening enough to devour him. Standing beaten up with a few of his limbs missing, Issei held up the wide orb that contained the body and soul of Aim no Monokunushi. Finally, I've conquered the heavens, Issei exclaimed with glee as he opened his mouth and ate the orb in one go. As Issei felt the power course through his body. It didn't last long as he grew even more powerful, however, he suddenly felt a soaring pain in his stomach. Instinctively, Issei opened his stomach mouth and vomited what looked to be a bunch of souls from his stomach that manifested into the gods that he has killed in his rampage. Feeling weakened, Issei could barely stand up as Izanagi stood in front of him with his sword in his hands, and was about to slice his body into pieces. But Issei opened his mouth, showing a pair of hands that created one final hand sign. Mnemonic technique. Soul split sealing. The Izanagi swiftly sliced Issei's body into pieces as a burst of aura erupted, revealing a corpse and a bunch of weapons laying on the floor. Issei Hida was defeated and sealed away, somewhere in the school. Sona Citri was inside of the school. She was in charge of walking in the middle of the hallway in the dead of night, while behind her were a group of boys and girls walking almost zombie-like behind her. Sona guided the group of students to the gym building and made them all stand in the middle of that room. Walking over to the table where Kurumi Tojo was standing, Sona nodded as the maid raised her hand as a green magic circle appeared on the ground. So how does this work exactly? Sona asked the green-haired maid, who stared stoically ahead. Each of Master Issei's body parts and weapons contains a good portion of Issei's power and soul. His aura alone can forcefully turn humans into demons, Kurumi explained as Sona took out the body part that Issei gave her. I get it now. You will fill the entire circle with Master's aura, which in turn will turn these humans into demons. Sona finished as the maid nodded and gestured for the body part. Sona nodded as she placed the part on the ground as a smaller magic circle appeared beneath it, which connected to the larger magic circle with the students in it. Are you sure it's wise to use students of your school as test subjects? Kurumi asked. Not that she really cared for humans, but she didn't want to disturb her master with trivial problems. I've already handled it. I've erased all the previous state of all these students, so nobody knows what happened. Sona answered as Kurumi nodded in return. Very well. Observe, Kurumi ordered as she activated the magic circle. Immediately the body parts started releasing a two of demonic energy that traveled from the smaller magic circle to the larger one where all the students were standing. All of a sudden all the students started screaming in pain as their bodies were covered with Issei's aura. Slowly their bodies started to mutate as all of them became more demonic in appearance. Growing horns, wings, tails as their skin changed from color, they all changed completely and looked what could be called creatures of the night. Sona had a look of fascination before it turned to boredom. It seems none of them could contain the small portion of Master's power. Sona mused in disappointment. Kurumi just stood still but gave her a raised eyebrow. Were you expecting something else to happen? She asked respectfully as Sona nodded. Yes. I was hoping that some would contain their human appearance just like you. But none seen was able to, Sona answered, making Kurumi interested. Are you planning to create more demons to serve Master? Kurumi asked, making Sona nod. Yes. I've come to think that having an army of skilled and conscious demons would be more suited than just mindless beasts, Sona replied. Kurumi nodded before looking at the demons before speaking. Well, it doesn't happen often. But there were a few demons like me that were born in the Dark Night period. They weren't loyal to Master, but originated from the sheer demonic energy that he released on the land. It caused mindless demons like these in front of us to be born, and even some demons that take a human appearance and have an actual consciousness. They are rare, but I remember a few who were quite powerful. Of course, they were no match for Master Issei. Kurumi revealed, surprising Sona. There were other demons like you, but how come that they aren't loyal to Master? Kurumi raised her hand to her chin and thought. Perhaps I'm different than them. I was the only demon turned by Master. The others that I've met were naturally born from the demonic energy that ran across Japan because of Master's immense aura. That's why they weren't loyal to Master. Well, some were loyal as they saw Master Issei as their god, while others wanted to defeat and claim the throne as strongest for themselves. Kurumi answered as she recalled her past encounters with human-like demons that were indeed powerful in their own rights. But in the end, they were maggots compared to her master. I see. If there was a way to create demons with a conscience like you without them losing loyalty, that would be the greatest way to increase our forces in a short time. Sona theorized as Kurumi nodded but kept her expression neutral. You speak like you are the one calling the shots. Don't forget that you and I are nothing but tools for Master. We serve no purpose other than being useful to him. We don't plan ahead which path Master must take. We will choose the path himself. Don't forget that. Kurumi warned with a serious look as Sona nodded. I won't forget. I'm not planning against Master or trying to act as an advisor. But I'm just trying to get most out of our chances, Sona assured as Kurumi nodded. Good, but I don't have an answer to that problem. I studied demons and how they came to existence. But I never learned how human-shaped demons were born. I assumed that they were simply a rare occurrence. Kurumi answered as a new voice spoke to them which surprised them both. Well, you are right on the last part, Kurumi. Issei appeared in the gym while licking the blood around his lips. Both girls immediately went on their knees for their master, as Issei gestured for them to stand. Rise. And Sona, the answer to your question why those ants turned into mindless demons is that they were simply overloaded with demonic energy. You see, anybody can become a demon or devil when they take in demonic energy into their body and let it merge with their soul. Issei revealed, surprising both girls as Issei walked over to one of the female demons and pressed his hand on her. You mean they can regain their consciousness after transforming? Sona asked as Issei shrugged. It depends on the will of the human, but yes, for example, when you turn these humans into demons, they were overloaded with demonic energy with no way of controlling it. The sheer amount affected their soul, but also the mind, as both are needed to manipulate demonic energy. Issei explained as his aura surrounded the female demon before her body seemed to turn back to human as she was naked on the floor looking at Issei with a lustful look on her face. That means, for one to be able to become a demon, they need to absorb demonic energy bit by bit to allow their soul to adapt to it, and learn to control their demonic energy to prevent mutating and losing control. Kurumi theorized as Issei nodded before he lifted the girl up her feet before biting face off with his razor-sharp teeth, and chewing on it like it was some piece of meat, which it technically is. Yep. Like with this girl. I controlled her demonic energy so her soul was able to handle it. But her mind was already broken from the sheer amount. So if you want to create loyal demons, do that ritual again, but do it bit by bit, Issei advised as he finished eating the female demon. Ah yes, Sona. Yes, my lord. Sona replied as Issei grinned at her. I've changed my plans. I think I'm gonna use Qi to create a base of some sorts. The Shinto gods are livid and are currently occupied with destroying the demons that are rampaging all over Japan. So now is a good time to make preparations for my next conquest. Issei explained, making the raven-haired devil look at him with interest. And what do you wish to do, master? Sona asked as Issei grinned. Simple. I want you to create an army of all people of this school. However, you are in charge of creating the army of mindless but loyal demons. I'm gonna be busy creating the more powerful demons, Issei answered, making Kurumi confused. My apologies for questioning you, master. But I was under the impression that you lost the ability to create more demons. Kurumi questioned as Issei nodded. I thought so as well, but after I regained more of my power back, I regained some of demonic abilities back. With one being able to turn others into demons with my blood. It isn't on the same level as before, but enough to create more powerful demons compared to these mindless idiots. Issei pointed at the horde of demons that went on their knees when Issei merely turned to their direction. Kurumi nodded as she didn't doubted her master one bit. But Sona had one question. But what about the Gremry peerage and mine? Sona asked as Issei just grinned. Simple. Capture them, torture them, rape them, and I'll then them into loyal demons myself. Issei answered as it was obvious. Sona couldn't help but grin as the thought of finally showing her superiority towards Rias. It will be done tonight, master. Sona bowed as Issei nodded with a smirk. Good. Also, Kurumi, I need you to prepare something for me. Issei ordered as Kurumi bowed. It wishes my command, master, Kurumi replied as Issei nodded. Good. You will be busy with this task for a while. So begin with it now, Issei then explained something to Kurumi as Sona listened on, but her face turned nearly purple of what she just heard. That's disturbing, Sona muttered as Issei just shrugged his shoulders. Trust me. I've done worse. Anyway, both of you have a task at hand. Now get to it. Issei ordered before disappearing as both women were going to finish their own task at hand. As the night came by, Rias Gremry and her peerage were called by a sudden meeting called by Sona to meet at the gym of the school. Rias was surprised but agreed as she along with her peerage entered the gymnasium of the school and saw the entire Citri peerage. Tsubaki, Where's Sona? Rias asked as the queen of Sona. Citri shook her head. I don't know. I just got this call from her to bring our peerage to the gymnasium. Tsubaki replied as she narrowed her eyes. Somebody is here. Kaneko warned as suddenly a barrier around the gymnasium was erected as everybody was on high alert. Looks like you are all here. Everybody turned to the door and saw Sona Citri along with Kalawarna and Asia next to her. Sona, what's going on? Rias asked as Sona just gave her a scoff. Simple. It is time for you all to become useful to our master. Sona replied before raising her aura, which surprised them all as it was much higher than before. It made Rias and Akino's combined look like nothing. President. Tsubaki tried to get her attention as Sona just ignored her and turned to the other girls. Alwarna, you'll handle my peerage. Don't kill anybody since we can turn them into demons. Same goes to you, Asia. You'll handle the Gremry peerage. I'll handle Rias, Okino and my queen, Sona stated as both girls nodded. Understood. Both girls grinned evilly as they raised their auras as well. All the others got into a fighting space as Sona was first to attack by firing 2 blasts of water at the group, which turned out to divide them into 3 sections. Sona then raised her hand, which made that was laying on the ground blast up to the ceiling, creating 2 walls of water in between them with each girl in a different section. Let's get them! Sona exclaimed as she turned to her 3 opponents. Of Kalawarna. As Kalawarna turned to the Citri peerage, she created 2 spears of light in her hands as she grinned at the weak peerage. So this is all you got. This won't be difficult. Kalawarna casually taunted as Saji prepared his sacred gear and fired a tentacle at her, but she easily blocked it before glaring at the blonde man. Nobody but my master can touch me, worm. Learn your place. Alwarn then fired her light spears at Sagi, who couldn't defend himself as a white-haired girl stood in front of him and created a magic circle. Sagi. The white-haired girl yelled as she tried to block the light spears, but her defensive barrier wasn't strong enough as they pierced through it and exploded right in her face. Momo, Saji yelled but was cut off as Kalawarna appeared right in front of him and delivered a painful kick to his crotch that knocked the air out of Saji's lungs as he fell down on the ground, holding his bleeding crushed genitalia. Kalawarna turned to the rest of the peerage and just grinned before snapping her fingers as magic circles appeared underneath them before it blasted them with holy energy, but not enough to kill them, which resulted in all of them fainting of the sheer pain. That was easy, Kawarna said to herself as she started picking up the unconscious peerage before collecting the peerage members and waiting for the others to finish their fight. With Asia. As the water walls blocked them off, Asia turned to her 2 opponents, which were Kiba and Kaneko. Asia wasn't worried as she was certain she could handle them without much effort. Asia was surprisingly stronger than Kalawarna but a bit weaker than Sona. Kiba, who prepared a demonic sword, looked at the crazed priestess with a narrowed look. I've heard of you. Asia Argento, right? Exiled nun of the church. What are you doing with that fallen angel? Kiba asked as Kaneko prepared her gloves. Asia just smiled before summoning her sacred gear. None of your business, little child. But it looks like you are the one having sinned badly, Isaiah. Asia replied, shocking Kiba, who couldn't believe that this nun knew his true name. How do you know that name? Kiba growled as Asia just kept smiling. And find out. Kiba immediately charged at her, but his sword strike was blocked by a magical barrier by Asia, who then pushed him back far and fired 2 fire blasts in the form of skulls. And Asia's fighting style is Kindle like Shang Tsung of MK. Kiba tried to block the attacks but was burned a bit. Kaneko quickly tried to close her distance between them and punched Asia in the face. But her punch didn't connect as Asia created a thin magical wall in front of her face to block the impact before sending Kaneko with a wave of wind magic. Becoming a bit impatient, Asia gathered her magic as she suddenly summoned a bunch of souls that she had stored in her sacred gear and fired them in a concentrated blast towards the pair, but aimed in between them so both were separated. Using this chance, Asia closed the distance between her and Kiba and pressed her hand on his chest before filling his body with lighting magic that made him fall unconscious on the ground. An Echo, who watched her ally be defeated so easily, became scared as Asia just turned to her and grinned before sending a small blast of energy that completely engulfed her body in holy energy that knocked the catgirl out. dusting off her clothes. Asia grinned as she grabbed both defeated peerage members with magic and waited for Sona to finish her battle. But Sona. As the water walls were formed, Sona turned to her former friends. Sona, what are you doing? Rias asked as Sona just sighed. Why should I bother explaining when we are going to fight? Sona replied before raising her hand and firing a water blast at them, which made them all releasing their wings and take to the sky. Sona followed as she lifted herself up and fired 2 more blasts of water at them, which made Rias and Aquino block it with their defensive magic. But both were surprised at the sheer strength the attack had and were pushed back when their barrier broke soon afterwards. Tsubaki looked at her master and narrowed her eyes. They must have mind-controlled her. Tsubaki flew forwards as Sona planned to fire another attack again, and was shocked that Tsubaki suddenly embraced her and pressed her hand on the back of her head. Sona, please make up. Tsubaki tried to reach for Sona in her head as Sona's head was engulfed with magic. As soon afterwards Sona's head fell down as Tsubaki released her hand from her head. Sona. Tsubaki tried to call out to her master as she released the hug. Tsubaki. Sona looked back up with her violet eyes showing tears as Tsubaki was about to cry too. Tsubaki looked shocked as her eyes looked down showing Sona who had driven her fist into Tsubaki's stomach as the queen looked on with betrayal as Sona's eyes revealed the snake-like eyes with a sadistic grin on her face. Stupid girl, Sona whispered before spinning around and delivering a powerful spin kick to Tsubaki's face which knocked the queen out cold. Tsubaki! Rias yelled out as she glared at her friend. How could you do that to your own queen? Rias demanded before generating a ton of her power of destruction and firing it at Sona. But she just grinned and fired a blast of water that took the shape of a serpent that connected with Ria's attack, but to no one's surprise. Ria's attack was easily overpowered by Sona's as both Gremry devils had to dodge the incoming attack. Sona just smirked as she gracefully descended back on the wet floor. She's nothing more than an asset to me now. So will you be soon enough? Sona replied as Aquino glared at her. Then I don't have any doubt to attack you. Thunderbolt. Aquino fired a lighting attack from a magic circle to Sona which connected along with the wet floor which caused Sona to become affected with the lighting attack. But as Sona was electrocuted, they heard Sona laugh with delight. You really think this will stop me? Quote amusing, hey Aquino, you are a masochist, right? Here you'll enjoy this. Sona raised her hand as the water walls surrounding them both suddenly warped into a giant barrier around the three. As Sona grinned before bringing her hands together as from multiple directions came waves of water that encased Aquino in a giant water bubble. Aquino. Rias tried to free her friend who was imprisoned in water by firing a blast of destructive energy at Sona. But that proved to be a bit mistake as Sona simple caught the destructive blast and smirked at Rias' foolishness. You've fallen right into my trap, Sona exclaimed as she manipulated the destructive energy from Ria's attack and somehow combined it with her own water magic before firing a sphere of destructive water at the water bubble where Aquino was stuck in. As the moment it made contact, Aquino was bombarded with destructive energy as the bubble exploded with Aquino falling out of it with her clothes missing and heavily damaged. Aquino. Rias tried to catch her queen but that was her second mistake as before she could reach Aquino. Sona had already grabbed her by her foot and swung her up in the air before flying up and kicking her right in the gut, which made Rias cough up some blood, but Sona wasn't done. As Rias struggled in the air, Sona grabbed her by her crimson hair and gave the powerful punch right to her face, which left a giant bruise along with a broken jaw. Sona, however, was relentless as she punched her a couple of times again before punching her so hard that she was sent back to the ground. As Rias was laying on the floor in pain, she tried to crawl for help, but Sona suddenly landed on her back which made her cry out in pain. Please, Sona, stop this. Rias begged as tears rolled out from her bruised face as her eyes were swollen and black and she had a bunch of her teeth missing. But Sona couldn't care less as she dispelled the water barrier as both Asia and Carl Warner walked up to the defeated Gremry heiress. That was faster than expected, Carl Warner said as she turned to Rias while giving her a side eye. Asia giggled as she looked at Rias with a giant grin on her face. The evil priestess raised her hand and healed Rias in a matter of seconds. as the trio of girls started to relentlessly jump Rias with physical and magical abuse, which they did for a good hour before deciding that they had enough and let their master, with Issei. Issei was in the abandoned building alone as he stood by the altar where he transformed Asia into a demon. He was pressing his hands together as before him was a magic circle that was glowing. O death, become my partner once more. I, who devoured the heavens, give you a 1,000 souls for the one I desire. Bring me Giselle Jewel. Around Issei's body a suddenly storm of what looked to be human souls started flying out of his body into the magic circle, as all the souls from a 1,000 humans started gathering into it. As soon it transformed into one single life orb. Grinning at the success of his spell, Issei took the life orb and gave it a lick before downing it completely. I'm to be born again in the Surgeji. Issei grinned before closing his eyes as a sudden body started coming out of his hand, revealing a young woman with black hair or rather slim build. The woman laid on the floor for a moment before her eyes opened, revealing a pair of dark blue as she blinked in surprise. Good evening, Gigi. Welcome back to the land of the living. Issei greeted the black-haired girl who looked shocked at seeing the young man again before bowing her head. Welcome back to the world of the living, Gigi. Issei greeted the black-haired demon who gave a droopy smile while sitting up and giving him a bow. It's an honor that you brought me back to serve you, my lord. Giselle replied before noticing something rather important. If I may ask, where's my penis? Issei gave a grin before shrugging. I kind of forgot you were a boy back then. You did a good job as acting as a girl, so I assumed you wanted to be an actual girl yourself. Are you not happy with that? Issei asked as Issei shook her head practically. Not at all, my lord, Issei answered before smiling again. I'm just grateful that you gave me this chance to perhaps serve in bed, Issei suggested as Issei just grinned before lifting her up from the ground with one hand and started making out with the now female demon. I don't care if you were a boy or girl. I would have fucked you if I wanted to, Issei muttered as they made out but were stopped as a magic circle appeared behind him as Sona along with Calawarna and Asia appeared. My lord, it's done, Sona informed while failing to notice the new female Issei was making out with. Issei disconnected the kiss before stepping aside, allowing the trio to meet their new ally. Good. Perhaps timing as well. This is Giselle Jewel, a demon of the Dark Age era. She's now part of the team. Issei introduced the girl who lazily waved her hand at them. Hello, I'm Giselle. But call me Gigi for short, Giselle introduced herself as Issei looked at Sona. You see, my only worry was the loss of sacred gear users. That's why I was hunting humans for a bit until I had enough to bring Gigi back. Her power is called Zombie, and as it is named, she can create zombies with a mere drop of her blood. When turned into zombies, if the victim happens to be a sacred gear user that hasn't died yet, that user will turn into a zombie under Gigi's control without losing their sacred gear. Issei explained in short as the trio looked on in interest as Yazel giggled. I see. That means I can add as many sacred gears users to my collection, right? Gigi asked, making Issei nod. Anybody really? So long it isn't someone I'm after. I'm okay with it. Issei agreed, making Gigi let out a lazy cheer. Great, turning back to Sona. Issei walked over to her. So what are you going to do with your peerage? Issei asked as Sona chuckled before pulling out the demonic relic. I'm turning them into demons. I'm gonna follow your advice and make them into demons with a conscience. Sona answered as Issei nodded. Good. However, give that sacred gear boy to Gigi. She could make better use of it along with the night brat. The entire Grimmery peerage I want for myself. Issei ordered as the four girls obeyed. Understood. Master? Issei turned to Sona. Yes. Rias Grimmery has a sealed bishop in her clubhouse. He is a half-vampire with the power to stop time, but he can't control his sacred gear. Sona informed as Issei raised an eyebrow before thinking. Capture him and bring him to me later when I'm done with the girls. Do what you want with him in the meantime. Rape him to break his spirit, I don't care. Issei casually replied before vanishing away, leaving the girls to themselves as they all giggled evilly. But Gigi. Inside of a cell, Sagi Genshiro and Yudo Kiba were imprisoned in a cell together as both young men were stripped naked while chained to the ground. Both young men heard the sound of humming heading towards them as Giselle appeared by the cell gate, now wearing some clothes, and smiled droopily at them. However, her eyes showed a greater evil within. "Hello there, boys." Giselle opened the cell gate and walked inside. She licked her lips as she looked at her toys as she pulled out a tool kit from her storage space and took out a bunch of needles, a razor-sharp knife, a tweezer, and lastly a bottle of some sort. "Stay away." Saji tried to struggle, but he was still too exhausted from his utter defeat that Yazel just giggled and pulled him closer by the ankle before taking her tweezers and slowly started pulling on Saji's big toe, which made the boy scream out in pure agony. Oof. Saji was cut off as Yazel forcefully pushed the rag in his mouth and froze his mouth so he couldn't spit it out. "So noisy," she muttered as Saji tried to struggle by kicking her, but she summoned a pair of chains that kept Saji's limbs attached to the floor so he couldn't move much anymore, much to his agony. Sagi kept screaming in the rug as Yazel proceeded to redo a healer thing, which made blood splatter on the ground much to the girl's fascination. "So pretty," Issei muttered as she did the same for Sagi's other toes, leaving one foot, which made the poor boy struggle in total agony. However, Giselle wasn't done by any means as she did the same for Sagi's other foot, leaving him with none of his anymore as the blonde could do nothing but struggle in vain as his body was being toyed with. Giselle giggled while rubbing her in delight as Sagi kept screaming in pain. Giselle smiled at him as she took out the small knife and started gently slicing into Sagi's legs, humming a tune as Sagi's body legs were covered in literal drawings made of cuts. They were deep that blood started to leak out of all the cuts as Saji just gave up and hoped for it to end so soon. "Now that's a better look," Bezel exclaimed before turning to Saji's prized possession, which was healed by Asia before he was thrown into the dungeon. Issei grinned as she slowly picked the smaller than average sized rod with her fingers and gently stroked it. "You know, I was actually a man before I was brought back by Master, but I always felt more feminine for some reason, so I pretended to be a girl. But now that I'm one, I wanted to feel what's like to have my own ravaged by a manly, but yours won't give me that satisfaction. A shame really, my own back then was even bigger than this. But at least I will allow you to ejaculate before turning you." "You like that?" Issei asked, but Sagi shook his head with a glare. Issei took offense to that. "I see, you won't even appreciate such kindness from me. Then you don't deserve it." Issei then pulled out her knife and quite literally sliced off half of Sagi's off, which made the boy struggle again in absolute pain. "It's even smaller than before." "Well, you deserve it for not thanking me for showing such mercy." Issei then grabbed Sagi by his and squeezed them so hard that they literally crushed like grapes in her grip. Saji could do nothing as he fainted from the pain as Yazel giggled while licking the blood from her hand. Audrey went a bit too hard on him, Yazel muttered before biting the tip of her finger and letting some blood fall on Saji's body as it quickly turned red as Saji began to growl as he slowly rose up as he was turned into a zombie. Daiba, who wisely kept quiet this entire time, looked on in horror as Saji was released from his chains and rose up before looking at him with hunger. "Nah, no eating until I Issei." Issei kicked Saji to the wall, which made him fall on the ground unresponsive. Giselle then turned to the knight as her eyes sparkled with glee. "Such a cute you are, what to do?" "What to do?" Issei asked herself while walking over to him and pulling out her knife again. Kiba just closed his eyes accepting his death, but before he felt anything a shift in the air occurred as Giselle stopped and looked down at him. "What? Giving up on life already? That's boring." "Well, easy but boring. You're boring like all these little humans died at the hands of that holy sword." Gazelle's words stung Kiba, who looked on in pure rage as the black-haired girl smiled at him. "I'm not a sadist like them. All these poor children, giving false promises to become soldiers of God, only to be disposed of when they weren't fit anymore. Such betrayal, such despair. Thou I would have gladly taken all these children in and killed them all myself." Giselle's words were boiling Kiba's blood, who had somehow broke free from the chain and created a demonic sword and plunged it in Giselle's chest, which caused blood to spurt out of her body onto Kiba's skin. "Ah, you bitch!" Biba yelled while pushing the sword deeper in Giselle's body, who just giggled at him. "Bullish little boy." Her words made Kiba realize that he fucked up, as in an instant his skin turned dark red as his eyes lost the life in his body. Now, for daring to wound me, you must be punished. So cut off yours. Kiba's body moved on its own as Kiba made a smaller blade and in a swift motion cut off his own fell on the ground. Giselle giggled as she brought the bottle she pulled out and poured some on Kiba's crotch that was lacking part. The wound closed up but didn't heal the messing genitalia as Giselle walked over to Sigi and did the same. Now boys, come with me. Both armies groaned as they stood back up and followed Giselle out of the prison as their lives has literally turned to hell. Issei chuckled as he stood up and grasped both of Akino's breasts and played with them. You see, both your rook and queen were very loyal to you, but the thing is, the more they cling on to that loyalty, the harder they will fall when their will are broken. It didn't take long as both girls were already quite traumatized, which helped me a lot in breaking them into the good girls they are now. Like this. Issei snapped his finger again as Ria's eyes widened as Kaneko delivered a powerful punch into her stomach, which made Ria's puke on the floor as she clung onto her stomach. Now that you realize that you are at my mercy, let me explain what's going to happen to your little family, Issei said as he brought both Akino and Kaneko where Rias was and made them both sit beside her. Rias weakly looked up as Issei looked at her with a savage grin. Fuck you? What do you want from us? Rias weakly asked as Issei just shrugged. Nothing really. It's just fun toying with people that think that they are in charge. You may be the sister of Lucifer, but it will be too late for him to save you now. Issei answered before stroking his chin. But for now I'm gonna use your family to bring back a few of my old acquaintances. Don't worry, you three won't be gone forever since I still will be needing you three for another job. But your bodies, however, are needed for now, so be a good girl and open your mouth. As Issei uttered these words, all three opened their mouth against their willow willingly. Gigi. Go ahead. Gazelle giggled as she walked over each girl and placed a small cherry-shaped ball into their mouths. They were mostly black and red in color, except each one gave off a different feeling. After placing the balls into their mouth, Joselle closed their mouths with her hand before giggling. It's done, master, she informed as she strutted beside Issei. Swallow. All three girls gulped the odd object as Issei grinned at them. Seem that you won't be around for a bit. Any last words? Issei asked as Rias looked at Issei with nothing but hatred in her eyes. I in hell. Issei just grinned wider before outright laughing at her face. Don't worry, I'll be visiting there really soon to take the throne from your big brother. Now good night, Rias Gremory, you'll make up next time in my new world. Issei replied as he stepped back and created a hand sign. Demonic technique. Body sacrifice. All three girls' eyes widened as their bodies were immediately covered in a dark red aura as all three of them started screaming in pain as their bodies shower various demonic markings before their skin burned, as it was literally burning off of their flesh before completely burning off, leaving nothing but their bones. However, soon the bodies of nothing but bones started regenerating their flesh and skin, but when their bodies started to fully form, it took the shape of three different girls. A pink-haired girl that laid where Kaneko was, a black-haired girl that laid where Rias was, and lastly a blonde that where Akena laid. When their bodies were fully regenerated, the aura was still surrounding their lifeless bodies as Issei walked over before raising his hand as he pulled all three souls of the girls' bodies, which turned into life orbs before pocketing them away. Now to bring their girls back, Issei muttered as he created another hand seal. Unlike how he brought back Giselle, Issei had to sacrifice 1,000 souls to get Giselle's soul in return from the afterlife. But Issei didn't have that many souls left, so he decided to use something he hasn't done before. Which was possible thanks. Divine technique. Pure world reincarnation. As Issei muttered those words, his own black and red aura flared for a bit, as from his own aura, 3 small white spheres of energy started forming before each sphere hovered over each of the girls' body, before descending down and merging with the bodies. All 3 bodies glowed for a bit as slowly all 3 girls opened their eyes, as they all sat up and looked confused. What happened? All 3 girls asked at the same time as Issei looked at them with a grin. It has been a while, Mine, Bambi and Candy. They all turned to Issei as they all took a moment to realize who they were facing, as they immediately looked on with admiration from Mine, fear from Bambi and lust from Candy, before bowing with their heads low touching the ground. It's an honor to see you again, my lord. All three saluted in unison as Issei couldn't help but take in their naked bodies. Issei stopped for a moment as he realized that he had become far more perverted than he used to be. Not that he wasn't perverted back in the Dark Age era, but his perversion somehow became stronger when taking over his own descendant's body. For a pathetic brat, his perversion is so strong it affected even me. Issei thought before shaking his head, removing the thought from his brain. Giselle giggled as she walked forward. "Oh, how cute to see you three finally showing Master the respect he deserves," Giselle said, making all three look up at the zombie as the three girls had all mixed reactions. "GG. So you're the reason why we are back," Bambi yelled in anger as her aura rose, but quickly it stopped when Bambi noticed Issei raising his eyebrow, which scared the girl. So us coming back to life was Lord Akuma's plan. I guess we are enslaved to him now," Candy said as she signed in defeat. Issei just chuckled as he turned to Mimi, who was still looking at Issei with an admirable look. "That's no problem for me," Mina added as Issei just shrugged before walking back to his throne and sitting on it. All the girls, including Sona, Asia and Kalwarna, all kneeled down before Issei, who rested his head on his fist before smiling. "As the rest of you can see, there are 3 new warriors amongst your ranks. Stand up and introduce yourself," Issei ordered as Bambi was the first to stand up before turning to the rest. "My name is Bambietta Basterbean. I was known as the Explosion Demon a long time ago." Bambi or Bambietta introduced herself as she looked around the room as all girls nodded before she kneeled back down as Mini was the next one to stand up. "I'm Meninus McCallan. But please call me Mini. I'm the power demon from the Earl that Akuma reigned." Mini introduced herself before looking at Issei before bowing deeply. "I'm humbly honored that you have brought me back to serve you, my lord." Mimi then kneeled back down as Issei just grinned in return. Lastly, Candy stood up before giving a wide smirk. "I'm Candace Catnip, the Thunderbolt Demon. Pleasure to meet you." Candy gave a more friendly introduction before kneeling down as well. Issei recalled that despite these girls being close friends with Issei back in the Dark Age era, only Giselle was a willingly loyal demon to Issei. It is why only she knew his real name while the other 3 referred to him as Akuma. While the girls weren't disloyal to him back then, it was more of them becoming a close group at the time Issei conquered Japan, as they respected Issei but didn't worship him. But now that they were brought back to life by him, they had no choice to serve him. Standing up, Issei grinned. "Good to see you 3 understanding your situation. I'll explain our plans soon. But for now, let's just see that we are going to unleash hell onto the entire world. And also seem that you 3 are loyal to me now. Refer to me as Issei Heidu, which is my real name." Thanks for listening to my video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment below your favorite part. Sayonara, see you in the next video.